Do you all know the woman serving your food today used to be a maid in this very house?
A few laughs broke out almost immediately. Then, before long, the entire room began laughing along. Mrs. Beatrice's 60th birthday party was considered one of the biggest events of the year in that small town. More than 100 guests were present, from relatives, neighbors, church friends, to people who had known the family for many years. Long tables covered with white tablecloths filled the spacious yard. People ate, chatted, and raised their glasses to celebrate this hostess of the party. Only one person was not allowed to sit with the other guests. Ngozi hurried back and forth between the rows of tables, bringing more drinks, replacing some plates of food, and serving one person after another. Although she was the family's daughter-in-law, in many people's eyes, she still looked more like a servant. Mrs. Beatrice looked toward Ngozi and laughed. It was not the smile of a mother-in-law who was proud of her daughter-in-law. It was the smile of someone enjoying the power of making another person feel ashamed in front of a crowd. We gave her a place to sleep, she continued. We gave her food to eat. We gave her a roof over her head, and in the end, she became my daughter-in-law. The laughter this time was even louder than before. Some people covered their mouths. Some lowered their heads toward their glasses, embarrassed on Ngozi's behalf. But no one spoke up. No one told Mrs. Beatrice to stop. In places like this, people often prefer watching humiliation rather than stopping it. Ngozi stood frozen in the middle of the room. She was still holding the tray of drinks in her hands. She did not cry. She did not react. She did not defend herself. But that silence was not because she was not hurting. Sometimes, a person who has been hurt too many times no longer has enough strength left to defend themselves. The most painful thing that night was not the laughter echoing around her, nor was it Mrs. Beatrice's cruel words, Viz. The most painful thing was sitting only a few meters away from her. Chinedu heard everything. He saw everything. He saw his wife being turned into a joke in front of the entire town. All he had to do was stand up. All he had to do was say one sentence. All he had to do was protect the woman who had been his wife for so many years, just once. But he did nothing. He sat still, his eyes fixed on the table as if what was happening had nothing to do with him. And in that moment, Ngozi understood a truth she had spent many years trying to deny. The deepest wounds do not come from people who hate you. They come from people who know you are hurting but still choose silence that night. After the last guest had left the party and the laughter had faded into the darkness, Ngozi sat alone for a long time. She thought about all the years she had spent trying to be accepted. She thought about all the times she had endured things to keep peace within the family. And for the first time, she understood that there are people who will never forget who you used to be. No matter how hard you have worked 10 times harder than everyone else to change your life, it was on that very night that a silent decision began to take shape. A decision that would change everything that happened afterward. The story had actually begun many years before the birthday party that made the entire town talk. Ngozi grew up in a place where people knew each other's business before the people involved even had a chance to explain themselves. It was a small town where rumors traveled from one porch to another faster than the monsoon wind. A rumor could survive for years. The truth sometimes never had a chance to catch up with it. People remembered for a very long time who had once been poor, who had once failed, and who had once done low-status work. But they easily forgot how hard that person had worked to change their life. Ngozi understood that from a very young age. Her parents died before she was old enough to understand what death was. After the funeral, relatives disappeared from her life one by one. No one wanted to take on another burden. No one wanted to raise another child who brought no benefit to anyone. At the age of 16, Ngozi began working as a maid for Mrs. Beatrice's family. Every day of her life began before sunrise and ended long after everyone in the house had gone to bed. She swept the yard, cooked meals, washed clothes, cleaned the floors, washed dishes, and did all the jobs no one else wanted to do. Those tasks repeated themselves so often that sometimes even she felt more like a shadow than a human being. But Ngozi never complained, not because that life was easy, but because she knew that no one cared about the complaints of a poor girl with nowhere to turn. While other people slept, she often sat under the dim yellow light, studying from old books she had obtained from the local library. She always believed that if she did not give up on herself, life might eventually give her a chance. It was that calm determination that caught Chinedu's attention. Every time he came home from university, he saw Ngozi working. It was not her beauty that made him remember her, nor was it pity. What made him stop and look was the way she faced hardship without blaming anyone. Their feelings for each other did not begin with romantic confessions. They grew from very small things: a glass of water placed on the table at the right moment, a simple question asking if the other person was tired. One time, Chinedu saw Ngozi asleep on top of a book. After many hours of continuous work, the more he understood her, the more certain he became that she deserved far better than what life had given her. But the one person who never saw that was Mrs. Beatrice. In her eyes, Ngozi would always be nothing more than a maid. When she learned that her son wanted to marry her, she strongly opposed it. She told Chinedu that love could not erase a person's background. She said that a maid could never become family. She said that the entire town would laugh at their family. But Chinedu remained determined to marry her. The wedding took place despite his mother's opposition. Many people in town were surprised. Some said it was a beautiful love story. Some said Ngozi was incredibly lucky. Others insisted that Chinedu would regret it sooner or later. Only Ngozi believed that things would eventually get better. She believed that once she became Chinedu's wife, Mrs. Beatrice would gradually accept her. But she was wrong. After the wedding, she had a new title, but not a new place within the family, in Mrs. Beatrice's eyes. She was still the same maid she had always been. Mrs. Beatrice did not call her daughter-in-law. She called her the servant. She called her that in front of relatives, in front of neighbors, in front of people from the church. Every time guests came to visit, she found a way to bring up Ngozi's past as though it were the most shameful thing in the world. She used to mop my floors. She used to wash dishes in this very kitchen. Some people really changed their lives fast. Some people laughed. Some felt uncomfortable. But just as always, no one spoke up. Ngozi endured everything. She took care of that house as though it truly belonged to her. She took care of her husband. She took care of her mother-in-law whenever she was sick. She remembered Mrs. Beatrice's medication schedule more clearly than Mrs. Beatrice herself. But no matter how hard she tried, Mrs. Beatrice never saw her as a member of the family. What hurt Ngozi the most was not those cruel words. People can grow accustomed to cruelty if they live with it long enough. What exhausted her was Chinedu's silence. He never insulted her. He never raised his voice at her. But he never stood up for her either. Every time his mother made a humiliating remark about his wife, he chose to look away. Every time Ngozi was turned into a joke in front of other people, he said it was not worth creating more conflict. He called it keeping the peace. But over time, Ngozi realized a far more painful truth. Sometimes the person who hurts you the most is not the one who openly dislikes you. It is the person who witnesses all of that hurt and still chooses silence. Some marriages do not end because of betrayal or deception. They end slowly, little by little, under the weight of things that should have been said, but that no one was willing to say, Mrs. Beatrice's 60th birthday party should have been an evening of congratulations and laughter, but many years later, that was not what Ngozi remembered. What she remembered was the moment the entire room burst into laughter. When her mother-in-law turned her into a joke in front of more than 100 people. After Mrs. Beatrice pointed at her and reminded everyone that she had once been a maid in this very house, laughter spread across the rows of tables like a fire caught by the wind. Some people laughed because they wanted to please the hostess. Some laughed because they did not want to be the only ones remaining silent. And some laughed simply because they enjoyed seeing someone else being brought low. Ngozi remained standing there, the tray of drinks still in her hands, as though her body had forgotten how to move. For many years she had heard enough words like those, but there is a huge difference between being insulted in a corner of a house and being humiliated in front of an entire town. Mrs. Beatrice looked around the room, enjoying every gaze directed toward her, and then laughed. "If I hadn't felt sorry for her back then," she said loudly, "she would still be out cleaning other people's houses for a living." This time, the laughter was even louder than before. A few people lowered their heads toward the table. A few people turned their faces away, but not a single person spoke up and told her to stop. That is the most frightening thing about cruelty. It rarely belongs to just one person. It survives because of all the people who witness it and choose silence. Ngozi could feel dozens of eyes fixed on her. In their eyes, she was just a poor girl who had been lucky enough to change her life. Someone who had once been a maid and somehow managed to enter a more fortunate family. No one knew how many times she had swallowed her tears to keep the family at peace. No one knew how many times she had told herself that if she just tried a little harder, things would get better. No one knew how many years she had spent trying to prove that she deserved to be loved just like anyone else. Then she looked at Chinedu, the man she had trusted more than anyone else in the world. The man who had once said he would protect her. The man who had once said that her past did not bother him. Ngozi did not need him to argue with his mother. She did not need him to ruin the party. She did not need him to prove anything grand. She only needed one sentence. Just one. A sentence so simple that any husband could have said it. "Mom, that's enough." But Chinedu said nothing at all. He simply lowered his eyes to the glass of water in front of him, as though what was happening had nothing to do with him. And in that moment, Ngozi felt something inside her shatter. Not her heart that had cracked a long time ago. What shattered was her last hope. The hope that one day he would stand by her side. Some marriages do not end because of a betrayal. They end through thousands of moments of silence. Thousands of times when one person is hurt and the other chooses to look away. When the last guest left and the house gradually fell silent. Mrs. Beatrice was pleased with what she considered a memorable evening. Chinedu returned to his room as he always did. No one knew that something had changed. But Ngozi knew. For the first time in many years, she no longer felt pain. When a person has been hurting for too long, there comes a moment when they become frighteningly calm. She walked into the room, opened the wardrobe, and took out a small bag. She packed a few sets of clothes into it, not many. Because people who spend their entire lives taking care of others are often left with very little of their own. Then she sat at the table and wrote a short letter. No tears, no blame, no pleading, just a few simple lines. She placed the letter down, looked around the room one last time, and then stood up. That house had kept her there with hope for many years, but once hope was gone, no door was strong enough to keep a person from leaving. Ngozi stepped outside into the quiet night. No shouting, no slamming doors, no waking anyone up, and she did not look back, because sometimes the strongest moment in a person's life is not when they fight. It is when they decide to leave. After Ngozi left, the town began doing what it did best, gossiping. People talked about her in the markets, after church services, and on plastic chairs placed in front of their houses every afternoon. Some said she was too sensitive. Some scoffed and said she would come back soon, because someone who had once been a maid had nowhere else to go except continue being a maid. A few even insisted that she would return within a few months and apologize to Mrs. Beatrice. Mrs. Beatrice also told everyone who was willing to listen that Ngozi was ungrateful, that her family had rescued her from poverty and received nothing in return but betrayal. Every time Chinedu heard those words, he kept doing what he always did, remain silent. He did not defend his wife, but he did not disagree with his mother either, just as he had done for many years. Then 1 month passed. 3 months passed, 1 year passed. Ngozi never returned. She disappeared from the town as though she had never existed there. No one knew that in a city hundreds of kilometers away, she was starting over from nothing. During the day, she worked until she was exhausted. In the evenings, she studied anything that could help her move forward. She learned how to manage money. She learned how to do business. She learned how to stand on her own feet without depending on anyone. No one applauded those days. No one saw the nights when she fell asleep over her notebook. No one knew that there were days when she ate only 1 meal to save money for rent. No one saw the times she sat alone in a small room and wondered whether she was making a mistake. But the next morning, she still got up. She kept going. Because people who have nowhere left to return to are often stronger than others imagine. In the 2nd year, she managed to open a small shop. In the 3rd year, a 2nd shop appeared. By the 5th year, Ngozi's name began to be mentioned in places where no one had ever imagined a girl who had once been a maid could enter. While the old town still remembered the girl holding a tray of drinks and being humiliated at that birthday party years ago, Ngozi had become a completely different person. She no longer bowed her head to anyone. But the most remarkable thing was that she never went back to prove it. Because at some point in the journey of growing up, people realized that success is not about making those who once looked down on them regret it. Success is living so well that their approval is no longer needed. 5 years is long enough for a person to rebuild their life, but it is also long enough for someone else's life to begin falling apart, while Ngozi quietly moved forward. Mrs. Beatrice's family began moving in the opposite direction. At first, they were only small problems. Chinedu lost an important contract, then an investment failed. After that came more and more bills and less money in the bank. He kept telling his mother that everything would be fine soon. But people who are accustomed to living comfortably often do not realize they are sinking until the water is already over their heads. Debts began to appear. Calls demanding money became more common than calls asking how they were doing. The people who had once filled every seat at family gatherings suddenly became strangely busy. Some stopped answering their phones, some promised to call back, some disappeared completely. Mrs. Beatrice tried to hold on to her pride for a very long time. She had always believed that her family was different from everyone else. She had once thought that money, status, and connections would always protect her. But life has a very cruel habit. It often takes away the things people trust the most first. Then Mrs. Beatrice became ill. At first, it was only constant fatigue. Then came more frequent trips to the hospital. The cost of treatment continued to rise while their financial situation continued to worsen. Chinedu began selling things he had once been proud to own. The car disappeared from the driveway. A piece of land was mortgaged. Plans for the future were gradually replaced by one question: how to survive the next month. The most painful thing was not losing money. It was watching how people changed when the money was gone. The people who had laughed loudly at that birthday party were nowhere to be seen anymore. The people who had once called Mrs. Beatrice their sister, their relative, their close friend suddenly became distant. They stopped visiting. They stopped sending messages to ask how she was doing. They stopped sitting for hours talking the way they used to when the family had money. Everyone wanted to stand close. When hardship arrived, everyone found a reasons to move away. And then, for the first time in many years, one name began appearing again in conversations: Ngozi. At first, it was only a casual remark from a neighbor. "I heard that girl Ngozi is very successful now." Mrs. Beatrice immediately dismissed it. She did not believe it. In her mind, Ngozi was still the poor girl who had once cleaned her floors, still the girl who had left in the middle of the night with a small bag. But then the name appeared again and again. One person had seen a company sign bearing Ngozi's name. Another said she had just opened a new branch. Someone else said her photograph had appeared in a local newspaper article about successful business owners. At first, Mrs. Beatrice thought they were exaggerating, until one day she saw it with her own eyes. Ngozi's name stood on an office building. No longer the girl who used to stand with her head lowered in the kitchen. No longer the woman who had been turned into a joke at a birthday party. The person she had once called a maid was now addressed with respect. The person she had once believed would fail had become more successful than anything she had ever imagined. And for the first time in her life, Mrs. Beatrice did not feel angry. She did not feel jealous. What she felt was fear, a cold fear that slowly crept into her heart, because for the first time, she realized a truth she had spent many years trying to ignore. The woman she had humiliated in front of the entire town had not fallen apart after leaving. On the contrary, she had built a life that Mrs. Beatrice could now only look up at from below. And the most frightening part was that she also understood that the only person who might be able to save her family from their current situation was the very person they had treated the worst. Life does not always punish people with thunder or sudden disasters. Sometimes the greatest punishment is simply realizing that the person you once looked down on has become the very person you are forced to beg. 3 weeks after seeing the article about Ngozi, Mrs. Beatrice finally did something she had sworn many years earlier she would never do. She called her. The first call went unanswered. The second call went unanswered as well. By the third call, a polite secretary answered and explained that if they wanted to meet Mrs. Ngozi, they would need to schedule an appointment first. That alone was enough to make Mrs. Beatrice uncomfortable. There had once been a time when all she had to do was call Ngozi's name and she would immediately appear. There had once been a time when that girl waited outside the kitchen door to see what she needed. But time has its own way of changing people's positions. 1 week later, Mrs. Beatrice and Chinedu sat in the reception area of a modern office building. Neither of them spoke much. The clock on the wall slowly ticked through each passing minute. Mrs. Beatrice kept tightening her grip on the bag in her hands. Chinedu stared down at the floor. Both were thinking about the same thing, yet neither had the courage to say it aloud. 5 years earlier, the woman they were about to meet had left with a small bag and a shattered heart. Today, they were the ones sitting and waiting for a chance to see her. There are lessons that life does not teach through words. It teaches them through reverse positions. Finally, the door opened. Ngozi walked in. No more worn-out dress, no more timid appearance, no more eyes constantly searching for acceptance from others. She walked with the calm confidence of someone who had rebuilt her life from the ruins. Mrs. Beatrice burst into tears almost immediately. The tears came faster than the words. She spoke about her illness, about the debts, about the difficult months, about how everyone had turned their backs on them then. For the first time in her life, she said something Ngozi had waited years to hear. "I was wrong." Just 4 simple words, but they came too late. Chinedu looked at the woman who had once been his wife. His eyes were filled with the regret she had stopped waiting for 5 years ago. "We were a family once," he said quietly. The room fell silent. Ngozi did not answer immediately. She looked at the man who had stood silent while his mother humiliated her in front of the entire town. Then she looked at the woman who had made her believe that no matter how hard she tried, she would never be accepted. Some wounds heal with time, but some wounds simply stop bleeding. At last, Gozi spoke. Her voice was so calm that it made both people sitting across from her struggle to breathe. A family is a place where people protect each other, she said, not a place where people constantly hurt one another and then expect to be rescued when things become difficult. Mrs. Beatrice lowered her head and sobbed, but this time tears were no longer something that could change anything. There had once been a time when Gozi would have done anything just to be accepted by her. There had once been a time when she was willing to forgive again and again just to hold on to a family. But the woman sitting in that room today was no longer the girl she had once been. Pain had taught her something that kindness never could, that some doors should remain closed forever. Gozi did not humiliate them. She did not remind them of everything she had endured. She did not seek revenge. That made everything even more painful. Because sometimes polite distance weighs heavier than anger. She simply looked at them and said, "I have forgiven what happened, but forgiveness does not mean coming back." Mrs. Beatrice closed her eyes as though she had just heard the final verdict. Chinedu said nothing more because for the first time in his life, he understood that some opportunities come only once, and he had lost his opportunity a very long time ago. Gozi stood up, opened the door, and ended the meeting. No goodbye hug, no promise to stay in touch, no hope left behind for the future. When the door closed, Mrs. Beatrice sat motionless for a long time. For the first time, she understood that the most painful thing was not being denied help. The most painful thing was realizing that she had lost a good person because of her own pride. As for Gozi, she returned to her desk and continued her day like any other. Not because she was heartless, not because she wanted revenge, but because she had finally understood something. A person's worth is not determined by where they begin, nor by the labels other people place on them. It is determined by how many times they can stand back up after being knocked down. Many years ago, the entire town laughed when people called her a maid. Many years later, time itself answered on her behalf. And that is the kind of justice that leaves people silent far longer than any argument ever could. And if you enjoy stories about self-respect, resilience, and the deeper lessons of life, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next stories. Who knows? In one of those stories you may find a part of yourself.